Okay, Horayot, Daf Yud Amud Aleph. This week we're going to be discussing a story of Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua who were on a voyage at sea. And we will see, it's broken into two parts. The second part is a bit of astronomy, talking about the stars and the constellations, even some comets. And the first part is two parallel debates between first Rashi and then the Rama and then the Yun Yaakov and how they interpret the story. Where Rashi says something, the Rama disagrees with him, and the Yun Yaakov kind of saves Rashi. And that happens in one context and in a second context. So we'll learn the Gemara and Horayot, we'll read the story, we'll see the two sets of machlokot, we'll understand the moral or the ethical purpose of the story, we'll talk a bit about the astronomy, and then at the end the Maharsha has a twist in terms of how to understand the story, which is a completely different take on the entire thing. So, the Gemara and Horayot and Daf Yud Amud Aleph. Tana Rabbanan, Asher Nasi Echeta. Okay, the context of Horayot is about these korbanot that are brought by the leaders, the Nasi, the Kohen Gadol. So that's the starting point. Asher Nasi Echeta, that's the pasuk. Prat lechole. So the Braita says, right, if Nasi sins, so he has to bring us the korban, but that excludes if he's sick. Then he doesn't have to. Mishum dehava lechole yidchele min siyuteh. Well, just because he's sick, he isn't a Nasi anymore and doesn't have to bring the korban siyut. Amar Rav Avdimi bar Chama prat le Nasi shenitztara. When it says sick, it means specifically tzarat. And once a Nasi gets tzarat, he's relieved from his duties as a Nasi. Shene'emar, and we have a story of Uziyahu, who was one of the Malchei Yehuda, that he wanted to go into the Kodesh HaKodashim and offer the Ktoret, and I think it's Yehoyada. The Kohen Gadol at the time says to him, you're not allowed in here, this is only the Kohanim are allowed in here, and you're from Shevet Yehuda, but he insists, and Tzarat breaks out on his forehead. As we're told in Melachim, Vayinaga Hashem et HaMelech, Vayim et Tzara ad Yom Moto, Vayeshev beveit HaChofshit, V'yotam ben HaMelech al HaBayit. So what I just explained is in Divrei Yamim, not in Melachim. It's in the parallel story. Melachim just says Hashem struck the king with Tzara. It doesn't give the story. But it says that he was a Mitzorah until he died, and he lived in this place, Beit HaChofshit. That's where he was quarantined. And his son, Yotam, was basically the acting king while his father was sick as a Mitzorah. Okay, and the Gemara concludes in this passage, Midika Amar Beveit HaChofshit. So what does it mean that once he got Tzarat, he went to live in the house of the free? Michlal Da'ad Hashta Eved Hava. Okay, so from here you derive that until that point he was a slave. Who was he a slave to? The people, right? That the king, not that he's it's actually Inyana Dioma, right? That a ruler, a leader of a people has to view himself, and we'll see the Meiri has a beautiful passage on this, so we'll see this later, that the king has to view himself not as an authority over the people, but as a servant of the people. And we derive that message from the fact that Uziyahu was placed in Beit HaChofshit. When he was relieved of his duties, he actually became free. And this is this message of leadership actually means responsibility and servitude, as opposed to authority and control, is brought out in the following story. Yad Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua havu Azdli besfinta. Okay, one day Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua were on a boat. B'hadid Rabbi Gamliel have a pita. In Rabbi Gamliel's bag there was a pita. He brought that to eat. B'hadid Rabbi Yehoshua have a pita v'sulta. And in Rabbi Yeshua's bag he had a pita, but he also had flour to make more pita if necessary. Shlim pita to Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel ate his allocated bread, his pita. Samach asulta to Rabbi Yehoshua, and he had to rely on the flour of Rabbi Yehoshua and use it to make more bread. Amar le, so he said to him, Mi havayadata tehavalan ikuva kulehai te'ite sulta. So Rabbi Gamliel said to Rabbi Yehoshua, how did you know that the trip would be delayed to this extent that you thought in advance to bring the flour to make bread in case we were delayed? Right? Amar le, Rabbi Yehoshua says to him, Kochav echad l'shivim shana ole umat'et asfanim. There's a star that rises every 70 years and leads the sailors astray. Because they used to sail, and we'll see the Mepharshim talk about this, they used to sail based on the stars. That was their guide into which direction to go. And when the star came once every 7 years, it threw them off. And I said, maybe that once in 7 years is going to be when we're out at sea, and it will lead us astray. So I brought extra flour just in case. Amar lei, and he said to him, Kol kach biadcha ve'ata ole basfina. So Gamliel says to Yehoshua, you know this, and yet you're coming with me on the boat? This is the first question in the Rashi Rama Yun Yaakov. What is Rabbi Gamliel saying here? Okay, but he says, you have all of this wisdom in your hand, and you're still coming on the boat with me. Amarle said back to him, before you come and ask, why am I on the boat? You should wonder first about two students you have back at shore. Rabbi Elazar Chisma Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgota. These are two students of yours. They're so wise, they're so sharp, they can estimate or calculate the number of drops in the sea. But they are so poor, they don't have any bread or clothes to wear. Natan da'ato shivam barosh. So Rabbi Gamliel set his mind to lo shivam barosh, to appoint them at the head. This is the second debate of Rashi, Ramar, and Yaakov. What does it mean to appoint them at the head? Kashe'ala, when he got back to land, Rabbi Gamliel, shalach lehem. So he sent for them, velo ba'u, and they refused to come. Chazav shalach, he sent for them a second time, uba'u, and they came. Amar lehem, he said to them, kimedumim atem, shesrara ani noten lachem. You think I'm giving you authority that I've called for you and to be moshiv barosh? The opposite, avdut ani noten lachem. I'm giving you slavery, servitude. Shneimar, in the context of Rechavam, who was the son of Shlomo Melech, that his advisor said to him, you're going to be a slave to this people. The connection between the stories is the final message, namely that getting a position of authority is not srara, but avdut. Okay, so that's the thread that ties it to the context of Asher Nasi Yechata. And ultimately, that's clearly the message.
תתלה את זה בכיתות פה, שבאים להצביע.
בדיוק, ענייני דיום. This is an important message. That's what I was saying. That's why the Bechirot, they're designed not to fulfill this. They're designed that the people who want srara, no matter what, are the ones who end up being able to be in power. As opposed to people like Rabbi Elazar Chisma and Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgota that they were called and they were summoned, they did not come. They weren't interested in Sarah. And those are the people, perhaps, and like we said before, we started the shiur. To me, in Tanakh, this comes up over and over and over again. Moshe Rabbeinu and Yirmiyahu and Yonah and Shaul, they all ran away. They didn't want to be the leaders, and so that's what made them deserve to be leaders. So that's the message here. Okay, let's see the first discussion in the Rishonim Achronim. Rashi. So the first question was, Rabbi Gamliel said to Rabbi Yehoshua, after Rabbi Yehoshua, out of nowhere, starts talking about this star every 70 years. What's he talking about? So Rabbi Gamliel says to him, Chokach yesh bi'adcha v'ata oleh l'sfina. Chochma yesh bi'adcha v'ata yored l'sfina l'schora b'shvil mezonotecha. Klomar v'ata tzarich l'red l'sfina l'tzorech mezonot. So Rashi interprets this to mean, Rabbi Gamliel is saying to him, you're so wise, so intelligent, that you know these calculations of the stars. So why are you coming with me on this business trip? You should be smart enough to make a living some other way. You shouldn't need to rely on commerce in order to make a living. Okay? The commentary of the Rama is quoted in Hakotev in Yaakov, where it says Harama on the right side. Last week the pictures were very blurry, so I made an effort to make sure they were crisp this week. Hopefully you can read them. Okay, Harama zal hevi Rashi al ma'amar kol kach chochma yesh bi'adcha. Rama, he quotes Rashi, v'ikshalav, and he questions him. V'zel shono v'lo nihira li. It doesn't make sense what Rashi says. Da'atu kol man dechakim tuva ashiru. Is it true that anyone who's very wise is rich? In other words, if we take Rashi at face value, Rashi's putting in the mouth of Rabban Gamliel, you're so smart, you know all this about astronomy, so why do you need to come make a living with me? So, plenty of smart people are not necessarily wealthy. And furthermore, and furthermore, we know that Ashirim, they're the most likely to go on business trips to make more money and more profit. So that's what the Rama says. Rashi doesn't make sense. This is how I interpret this. In other words, you're so wise, you know everything about the comings and goings of the stars and the sea and what will happen at sea because of that. So if you were smart enough to bring the flour, because you were nervous about the star, so why were you not smart enough not to come at all? If you knew that...
לקחת סיכון, שיקרה משהו.
כן, בדיוק, לקחת סיכון, אבל ידעת שיש סיכון, אז למה אתה לא חכם מספיק כדי לדעת שהסיכון בפועל יקרה? And then you shouldn't have come onto the boat. אז אמר לי, ועד שאתה תמה, and then Rabbi Yehoshua responds, and so now the Rama is explaining Rabbi Yeshua's response, right? ועד שאתה תמה, עד שלא הועילה לי חכמתי להיזהר שלא לרד לים, right, so he says explicitly now what we just said. In other words, Rabbi Yehoshua is saying, before you wonder about me, wonder about the two students. So when he means, before you wonder about me, means before you start asking how my wisdom wasn't enough to make me realize not to go on the boat, right? Tamel shne talmidim sheyesh bayabasha, your two students, שיודעים לשער כל טיפין שבים מרוב חוכמתם ופלפולם. They're so sharp that they can estimate or calculate the number of drops in the sea. ואין להם לחם לאכול ובגד ללבוש. Which means, ואין חכמתם מועלת להם ליטול עצה לעצמן להרוויח אפילו כדי מזונותם. Okay, so that's how the Rama explains it, that's the שקלא וטריא.
הוא לא כאילו קשה על עצמו, כי אמרנו לפני שאם אתה חכם, אתה לא בכך עשיר, או שיש לך כאילו...
לא, אבל יש פער בין עשיר לבין מצליח להביא כסף לעצמו.
לא, אבל עדיין, יש אנשים מאוד חכמים. ברוב שהם חכמים, הם לא מצליחים אפילו להתנהל, לא יודע. ככה הוא פותח את הקושייה, שהוא אומר...
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I think the answer is, well, you have to say, like Yonas said, there's a difference between ashir and beged lilbosh velechem le'chol. But it's a good question. I agree. He kind of contradicts his own kushya and Rashi. That's a good point. Okay, so that's the second interpretation. So the first interpretation was it's about mizonot, about parnasah. That you're so smart, why did you go on the boat in order to make a living? The second interpretation was the Rama, which is why did you go on the boat? In other words, your ability to predict or assess what would happen on the voyage. And the third approach is the Yun Yaakov. So the Yun Yaakov, if we go back to the first page, where it says, V'chol kach yesh biyadcha ve'ata yored lasfina, on the left side. V'chol kach on the first line of the Yun Yaakov. Ki Rabbi Yehoshua ani hava. Rabbi Yehoshua was poor. כדאית בברכות דף כ"ח, מתוך כותלי ביתך ניכר שפחמי אתה. It says in Brachot that Rabbi Yehoshua was a blacksmith, and it was recognizable from the walls of his house, because they were charred from his work, that he was poor. וזה שאמר רבי יהושע, עד שתטמא עליי, and this that Rabbi Yehoshua says, before you wonder about me, וכו', היינו לפי שרבי יהושע היה בעל קבלה מעשיות, והיה אסור להנות. Mishum Adam. So I'm not entirely sure what Baal Kabbalah Masiyot means, but there's this idea that Rabbi Yehoshua, he was not allowed to get benefit from other people. Asur le'anot mishum Adam. It was not to benefit materially from other humans. K'mo shekatuv b'chidushei Eri Yaakov al Brachot Daf Chav Zayin. Okay, so there's a parachute that talks about the idea that Rabbi Yehoshua wasn't maybe like in the sense of a neder. I'm not exactly sure what this means.
I think Kabbalah Maisius is like almost like the magic part of Kabbalah, where you can make effects in the real world, and it could be that if someone knew that knowledge, they weren't allowed to benefit from it from other people, like get payment for it.
Okay.
I don't know.
Interesting. Okay. It's plausible. לכן כאמר, עליי אין זה תמיהה כל כך, לפי שאסור ליהנות משום אדם. So Yun Yaakov accepts Rashi's original explanation, right? And he says, when Rabbi Gamliel says, כל כך יש בידך ואתה עולה בספינה, ואתה עולה בספינה, it means, why do you need to make a living? You're so wise, why do you have to come to make a living? And then the Yun Yaakov explains Rashi. He says, when Rabbi Yehoshua responds and says, before you wonder about me, so he says, what do you mean before you wonder about me? Don't wonder about me because I'm not allowed to benefit from other people, so I have to go make a living like on my own through this chora. טמא על שני תלמידים שיש ביבשה, שאין להם לחם לאכול, אף שמותר ליהנות מהבריות. Right, but these two students, they're not the Baalei Kabbalah Masit. They are allowed to benefit from other people, So go wonder about them. Like, leave me alone. I'm not allowed to benefit from other people. So of course I have to do this in order to survive. But there's other people who don't have food and they are allowed to benefit from other people. So they're the ones who deserve your attention, not me. So therefore, Gamliel set his mind to elevate these students. They shall be raised up by their brethren. And then Yaakov adds it inside. This also answers the question of the Ramah, where the Ramah said, why would rich people need to go on the boat? Don't rich people also go on the boat? So the Yaakov here, I think he's redeeming Rashi, perhaps, but he's more giving just a separate interpretation. Right? He's saying, like, he accepts the idea that the discussion is about commerce, but he gives this totally different explanation to the back and forth.
איך זה מתרץ את הקושיה? לא הבנתי. כי אמרנו שרבי יהושע היה עני. לפי יעקב.
רבי יהושע היה עני, נכון.
הוא טמא עליו, למה הוא טמא עליו? לפי רש"י הוא טמא עליו שהוא חכם. ועדיין הוא יורד לספינה. אז אמרנו, לא כל מי שחכם הוא עשיר. ואז הרמה מקשה. אז הוא אומר שהוא מתרץ את רש"י, את הרמה. לא הבנתי את הרמה.
Yeah. So the truth is I was thinking, I was reviewing this just before, and I also wasn't sure what the Yaakov meant by that. It wasn't clear to me how this answers the Ramah's question. Maybe if we think about it a bit more. Because the Ramah raises two questions. He raises one, right, that just because you're wise, does that mean you'll be rich? And he also says, but even rich people sometimes have to go on boats in order to make a profit. It's not clear which of those kushiyot the Yaakov says the Ramah is answered, or how either of them are answered based on his explanation. So, if you have any ideas, otherwise I will think about it.
I think it seems that they are saying that if someone's wise, they should be rich. He's saying, like, both of these, Rabbi Yehoshua has the excuse that he's not allowed to benefit from other people, and therefore, despite being smart, he's not wealthy. And these two other students that aren't wealthy, despite being smart, he's putting that in a question mark. He's saying, I don't understand how that's possible. But it seems that there is supposed to be a correlation between being smart and being rich, according to this.
Okay.
זאת אומרת, אתה אומר, רבי יהושע היה עני כי הוא נדר משהו שהוא לא יכול ליהנות מאחרים, אבל שניהם לכאורה חכמים, אז הם היו ראויים להיות עשירים. אז תתמה עליהם למה הם לא עשירים ולא עליהם.
ולכן זה שעתו עשירים, כאילו חכמים יכולים להיות עשירים, אז תשובה היא, זה לא מתרץ את הקושיה, זה פשוט אין הכי נמי, נכון. עשירים, חכמים אמורים להיות עשירים.
כן, אולי.
Okay. All right. Good. Let's look at the second set of questions. The second question, what does it mean lo shivam barosh? Right, that Rabbi Gamliel wanted to appoint these two Rabbanim to the head. So going back to Rashi where it says Natan. So Rabbi Gamliel da'ato alehem lo shivam barosh kedei shiyu mitparnesim me'ota srara she'iten lahem. So Rashi is consistent. L'shitato, he says, right, the whole context was about how Rabbi Yehoshua, he asked Rabbi Yehoshua, why are you so poor? And Rabbi Yehoshua said, before you wonder about me, wonder about them who are so smart, but they don't have a way to put bread on the table. So Gamliel said, okay, I will then appoint them to be leaders of the academy so that they'll get money for that, and that's how they'll put money on the table. So it makes a lot of sense. The Ramah, who attacked Rashi's previous explanation, attacks Rashi's explanation here as well. On the next page, HaKotev says as follows, Natan b'da'ato Rabbi Gamliel einav lo shivam barosh, pi Rashi v'chulu, v'lo nihira li. So again, it doesn't make sense. De'al lashon lo shivan barosh, b'shivam mashma, כדאמרינא בכתובות, אצלי ככתובות, חנינא בר חמא ישב בראש, ובישיבה מאי פרנסה איכא. So he assumes that when someone's appointed to the head of the shiva, that's a position of honor. They don't make any money from that. So how would this help, right? Rather, it makes sense to say that when Rabbi Gamliel set his eyes on these students, Mishum de Shabchin hu Rabbi Yehoshua kulehai, because Rabbi Yehoshua praised their wisdom so much. Right? Amar ruina lalu shivam barosh. Ulumotan parnasim latzibur. So when it says Natan Shivan Barosh, it wasn't so that they could make a living. It was because, remember, the Ramah's explanation was that Rabbi Yehoshua was saying, before you wonder about my wisdom, wonder about these people who are much wiser than me. Your own students, they are able to share tipot bayam. So Gamliel says, Rabbi Yehoshua says they're much wiser than him even, so they should be the heads of the academy because they're so wise, so they should be responsible for being in charge. Okay, etc. So that's his way of understanding what Lo Shivan Barosh is. It's not about giving them a livelihood, it's about they deserve it because they're so wise. Okay? And then the Yun Yaakov, in his third explanation, where it says, Kemedumin aten shesarut aninu ten lachem, in the middle of the Yun Yaakov. So he says as follows, Hainu, listarer al hatzibur, uleatil alehem ema yitera. You think, so this is Rabbi Gamliel saying to the students, you think I'm giving you Sarah, authority? So do you think I'm giving you the ability to instill a fear upon the people? Avdut ani noten lachem. I'm giving you servitude. What does that mean? Hainu le'anhig et hatzibur benachat v'lisbol ol hatzibur. Right? It means, what is the avdut? It means to lead pleasantly, not out of fear, and to graciously carry the burden of the people on your shoulders. Kedeita beperak Kama de Sanhedrin. V'zeh avdut. Because that is servitude. Pasuk, so when it brings the pasuk from Rechavam, right, to lead them pleasantly, and not to enslave them, or make their lives difficult. Right, not to be a despot, not to be a harsh ruler, to be a kind ruler. And so that's why it connects back to the original starting point of this, which was the story with Uziyahu, Asher Nasiach Chata. So he's connecting not just the fact that both this and this are talking about that it's avdut, that leadership is avdut, but it says specifically with the story of Uziyahu. What was the problem with Uziyahu? Why did he get sarat? The pasuk talks about that he became arrogant, Uziyahu. His arrogance was what led he wanted to usurp the power of the Kohen Gadol. Okay? That's why he got sarat, because he overexerted his authority. Then he became free. So the idea is that the arrogance of Uziyahu is what led to him being deposed and then being free from the avdut that he was supposed to have. And that teaches us this idea. Okay, and the Meiri says this, well, we actually referenced this before, but I'll say it inside because the Meiri just puts it very eloquently. And this really relates to the Bechirot tomorrow. Kol she'adam mitmaneh al hatzibur, hen malchut, hen shar minuyim. Right, so any person who is appointed over the community, whether it's a king or a local municipality, tzarich lizaher shelo yitga'eh be'atzmo. He shouldn't become arrogant. V'lo yitil ema yitera, and he shouldn't rule out of fear. Shelo l'shum shem shamayim. It shouldn't be for this, that he shouldn't rule not for the sake of heaven. V'yaleh b'da'ato tamid she'eno melech o nasi ela eved memuneh lir'ot bi'iskei ha'am u'le'atzil ha'ashok miyad ha'oshko. So he should view himself not as a king or a ruler, but as a servant whose role is to help the people and to save the oppressed from the oppressor. When Uziyahu got tzara, כתוב בו וישב בבית החופשית, שעניינו שעד עכשיו היה עבד. Until this point he was a slave, ונסתלק לו מאותו עבדות, and he became freed from his slavery as a king. ואף על דרך הפשט יש לפרשו כן. So the Meiri adds, this isn't even necessarily a drash of Chazal, it's actually the pshat. How so? שהיה למלכים בית מיוחד לעמוד שם לפעמים. What is this beit chofshit in the story of Uziyahu? So even according to the pshat, the king had a room in his palace, in his gardens, where he'd go in order to think, to free himself, to isolate himself, to escape from the demands of the kingship. ולא להשתדל בענייני מלכות כלל. ואחר שנסתלק מעסקי המלכות קראו בית חופשית. So it's called the place of freedom. Okay, וכן הוא אומר ברחבם אם היום תהיה עבד לעם הזה, ומעשה הוזכר בכאן שמשם אתה למד גם כן דבר הזה. That's why this is mentioned here in this Gemara, to teach you that idea. Okay. That is the two discussions of Rashi, Rabban, and Yun Yaakov, and the explanation of the story. So two more things. So we talked a lot about what does it mean to go on the boat, what does it mean to be appointed to the head, but we skipped over when Rabbi Yehoshua says there's kochav echad oleh lekol 70 shana umat'eh et hasfanim. What is he talking about? Okay, so the Ben Yoyada, who lived in Iraq, in Baghdad, in the 1800s, I believe, around 200 years ago. So he writes as follows: Perush, ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu bara shnei kochavim ba'olam. Hashem created two stars, Shem kvuim, that they are fixed, ve'enan zazim mimkomam, and they don't move in the night sky. Ve'mechad b'kotav hatzfoni ve'echad b'kotav hadromi. One is in the northern axis, and one is in the southern axis. V'nikarim b'lashon Aravi b'shem Jidai. Okay, and in Arabic, because he lived in Iraq, so he knew Arabic, these are called Jidai. V'chol ma'alach ovrei drachim, hen bayam, hen bayabasha, balayla, hakol hu al yedei kochav hazeh. So therefore, anyone who's traveling, whether on land or by sea, they navigate themselves based on that star, because they know that star is north, due north, the northern star. It's fixed. Right? And without that star, they would get confused. So if you live on the northern hemisphere, the northern half of the world, you only see the northern star. Right, and we live in Baghdad because Iraq is in the northern hemisphere. We only see that. And it was in the southern hemisphere, and Dafka, they only see the southern star. And that's how they navigate bayam וביבשה. ורק אותם שהם יושבים תחת קו המשווה של מהלך השם תקופתו, הם רואים את שני כוכבים הנזכר. Only people who live near the equator are able to see both the northern and the southern star. Right? אחד בשבילי השמיים לצד דרום, ואחד בשבילי השמיים לצד צפון, כנודע זה לכל. If you're on the equator, you can see the two stars at the two opposite ends of the horizon. But if you go north or south, the other one dips below the horizon, you only see the one on your side of the world. So he knew astronomy. So he knew that there was a star in its likeness, in its luminance, and in its brightness, that it was similar to the northern star. Okay? ושאליו הולכים כל עוברי דרכים בלילות, בים וביבשה, וזה הכוכב נראה במקום אחד, מכוון ממש כנגד הכוכב הנזכר לאל. And when it came, this new star came once every 7 years, it came to the part of the sky that was where the northern star used to be. So it used to confuse people. כנגד הכוכב הנזכר לאל נקרא בערבי ג'ודאי. So this Judai is actually Arabic for Polaris, and Polaris is the name of the northern star. So he's talking about the northern star that we're familiar with. So he's basically explaining what happened. Everyone used to look at Polaris, and they see Polaris in that sky. It never moved. That's how they navigate. It's in the north. But if you had once every 7 years the star that it's similar in luminescence and brightness to the Polaris, and it comes and it's somewhere near it in the night sky, and then it moves, so then people think, oh, that's it, and then it confuses them. So he's explaining what Rabbi Yehoshua was saying, based on modern astronomy. ומחמת כן הסתובב שיתעכב בדרך הים כמה ימים ולילות על חינם, כי מדבר מחמת כוכב הדומה לזה. And therefore the traveler would get confused and delayed, and he'd wander around until he was able to kind of to write his passage. So great, we understand conceptually maybe what Rabbi Yehoshua was talking about, but what is this star that rises once every 70 years? So I saw that there's actually something called Halley's Comet. Okay, it's Shavit Haley, and for many, many years, Halley's Comet is the only comet that returns regularly. It's called a short period comet. It's every 75 years, the comet orbits, and it returns to the night sky every 75 years. So it's like once a lifetime you can see Halley's Comet. And what's interesting about Halley's Comet is if you look through history, there are records every 75 years from different cultures in the world recording a comet. But it was only Halley, who was an astronomer who lived around 300 years ago, or was able to connect that each of those sightings was the same comet returning periodically on its orbit. So you have all these different sightings from different cultures, and each one thinks it's a bad omen, or there's this comet. But he was the first one to calculate and put together that it's the same comet coming back again and again. And today we know the exact trajectory and everything about this comet. Satellites have taken pictures.
Also the same story where you have the different cultures seeing different It's known as, also mentioned in the Gemara, Mazal Kima. You have, which is in Japanese, it's called Subaru,
Okay.
which is that symbol
The
on
Pleiades?
the car. So yeah, you see on the was understood there. It's a constellation of 3, some say 4 or 5 stars. Now we know today it's much more, obviously,
Right.
with what we can actually see today. But there are different cultures from Japan to Middle America, Mesoamerica, where you have different depictions of it. Somewhere between 3 and 7 stars. So Subaru is a very interesting. So when the Gemara mentions Mazal Kima,
Right.
that's what it is.
Right.
So using very famous constellations, if you like, for navigation.
Yeah, I think the Gemara says that. How did Hashem bring the Mabul to the world? Mabul Noach. Natal shte kochavim mimazal kima exorkam or something. He took 2 stars from that and he threw them away, and that brought him Mabul. Like it opened the floodgates from the heavens and flooded the world.
Well, again, or if you can even understand what the lunar, the water level and then the connection between it's just a matter of making the moon a little closer, and then you have world oceans going haywire.
Yeah, 100%. Right. So I didn't see this in any traditional Mefarshim, but in Wikipedia it mentions that Halley's Comet, which appears once every 75 years, so if you calculate its appearances, so it would have appeared in 66. And that's when Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanani was alive.
Is it able to be confused for the North Star, Halley's Comet? It's a passing comet.
Yeah, it's a comet. I guess you wouldn't really...
It's a bright thing in the sky.
Yeah, it's Ben Yehoshua does. The Ben Yehoshua doesn't connect it to Halley's Comet.
I know, but
if
I'm pushing you on it.
Yeah.
Saying, I don't know if it would confuse
Well,
the
I'll tell you
sailors.
why I don't think this is a plausible theory.
Uh-huh.
Because the whole idea was that nobody knew that Halley's Comet was the same comet every 75 years until modern times.
Right.
Rabbi
He
Yehoshua
was
says
talking
it
about
comes
the-
back every
yeah,
70 years. So how did he know?
Well, maybe they did know, and we didn't know they knew.
Shachachum v'chizrum v'yazdum, like with the Menatzfach. Right. They knew, and then it was forgotten and
Well,
reestablished.
he had to have known something. He's saying something repeats itself every 70 years.
Oh.
So he clearly knew something.
Uh-huh.
You can't say he was clueless.
Wonderful segue to the Marashal. Okay.
Well, Jews were very there is a big question: who exactly were who was the navigator of Columbus, for example? Now the claim is, speaking of Jidai, and it's already mentioned, the claim is one claim is that he himself was probably might have been
Moron.
whatever, and his navigator was Muslim. That at least was the claim. So, but the thing is, they say that the Itzrulav, that learning how to navigate the seas, so to speak, that device was invented. Depends on who you ask, but it's a Jewish invention.
Right.
So again, they knew there was some kind of knowledge of how to navigate the seas. They found in the Gniza Kahirit, by the way, they found all these, we know today, Jewish seamen who were taking who led the commerce practically between Egypt and India 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
If you find very interesting stuff. There's a guy called Moshe ben Ishu, I think, who is one of the top guys who used to do that route. And speaking of navigation, the stars, the commerce. So this is knowledge that was that was already back in the day. So I guess you would think that this is something that has been passed down.
Could be.
Just a thought.
It could be. Yeah. Maybe it was known and forgotten and rediscovered. Could be. That at least that's what this theory would claim. If Rabbi Yehoshua is talking about this comet,
It's Rabbi Yeshua's comment.
yeah, it shouldn't be Haley. Correct. Rename it Shavit Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania. Okay. So I want to conclude with the Maharsha, okay, who says you're totally misunderstanding this whole thing. Okay, he says the following.
Oh, let's hear.
אבל הוא מבואר, כמו שכתוב בפרק הספינה, כי יורדי הים הגלויות נקראו יורדי הספינה. שהיא מטורפת כל שעה בים. That those who used to go out into Galut, the seas of Galus, were known as Yordei Sfina. It's a metaphor for people who went into exile. Because you go out on a sea voyage, you're leaving your home, you're going out. Right? V'ayin sham be'orach, okay, he brings it from this other Gemara, and you see there, V'al pi advarim ha'eleh, Amar Rabban Gamliel, okay, so this is how you have to interpret the story. Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua, you Azdli besfinta. So Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Yehoshua were traveling in a boat. What does that mean? Benivchei yam galut. They were traveling in Galut. Ad sheyitzruchu litvakeach im hatzdukim. Right, that they are traveling in exile to go debate with the Sadducees. Ve'amar debahadi de Rabbi Gamliel have a pita. Rabbi Gamliel had bread. What does it mean he had bread? She chochmat Torah be'atzma. Shenikret lechem, right? We know ein lechem el Torah. Kmo she'amu lechmu belachmi, ki Torah hi chayei nefesh. Kmo she'alechem hu ikar chayei nefesh. So Rabbi Gamliel had bread. He had Torah with him. Ubali dvakeach imahem. He's coming to argue with the tzdukim. Kefi chochmat Torah. That's the tool in his arsenal, in his debate toolbox. Aval amar Rabbi Yehoshua haya imo davar nosaf al apart. Rabbi Yehoshua, of course, he had the Torah, but he also had Shia Torah. Ki hayu imo bevikuach chochmot acherot shehem domot lesolet. He also had in his arsenal for the debate other wisdoms, which are compared to flour. Because the flour is just the basic ingredient that you need in order to get to bread. Right? You need to prepare the solet to get to bread. So like astronomy, which is one of these secular wisdoms, לחשוב תקופות ומזלות, to calculate the constellations and the different seasons, וחוכמת המספר, right? ותשבורת, I'm not sure what that is, הן הקדמה לתורתנו, right? They're ancillary to those wisdoms are kind of they're not the Torah, but they're הקדמה to the Torah. שעל ידי מי התורה נעשה לחם ומזון רוחני, חיי נפשו של אדם. Right, that we're talking here about spiritual sustenance. There's this not Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha, yeah. That there's a Gemara that of this whole story where one of the rabbis, he argues with the elders of Athens, and they have all these strange debates and stories. I think it's in Bechor and Avchet. So what does it mean that Rabbi Gamliel brought to the Sfinta bread, and Rabbi Yehoshua brought bread and flour? It means that Rabbi Gamliel, he was a yeshiva bacher. He came with Torah to debate the tzdukim, and Rabbi Yehoshua came with Torah, but he also knew astronomy. He also knew mathematics. He also knew other wisdoms as well.
Or you can also say it's a symbol, because one of the biggest biggest arguments, if you like, of the tzdukim was when you start the Sfirat Omer.
Okay.
Because what does it say in the Torah? It says
the calendar, you're saying.
Right. It's all about the calendrical calculations.
So there's two things here, because he comes with bread, and then you would say, okay, I don't know if it's Pesach or not, but it depends on who's
bread, Pesach bread,
Pesach, yeah. And Chadash, which is the new,
yeah.
the new new program. So again,
it's
good. A symbol.
Yeah, good.
It's for him to say, kind of say, oh, what do you say about this?
Right, very good. Yeah. It kind of reminds, what you mentioned just now, in a very different context. It's funny, because Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua, specifically, famously, in Brachot, argue about Yom Kippur, where Rabbi Gamliel says to Rabbi Yehoshua, he orders him to come b'maklo on Yom Kippur, right, and carry money
a stick in his
stick. But that's Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua.
Yeah.
And here they're united against the tzdukim in a debate about time and about the calendar. It was very interesting. Good. רוצה לומר שנשלם לו הוויכוח בחוכמת התורה. שלא היה יכול לנת... Okay, so what does it mean, Rabbi Gamliel, shlim le'pite de Rabbi Gamliel? His bread ran out. What does that mean? Rabbi Gamliel came to argue with the tzdukim about Torah, and he realized he wasn't able to defeat them in debate. Why? כי הם לא יודו בכולה. Because they just would say, I don't accept your Torah Shebaal Peh. Like, okay, you might be very wise in Torah Shebaal Peh, but I don't accept any of your... It's founded on assumptions that I don't accept. So he didn't have any ability to defeat them in debate or convince them. הוצרך רבי גמליאל לסמוך עצמו להתווכח עמהם ולנצחם בשאר חכמות, שהוא סולטה, דבהדה רבי יהושע. So he had to go and use the flower of Rabbi Yehoshua, which means he had to rely on these other chachmot that he didn't intend to need to rely on in order to debate the tzdukim. Right? Ve'amar leRabbi Gamliel. So he said to him, Mi avad yadat da'it lan ikuva kulehai. Right? So Rabbi Gamliel says to Rabbi Yehoshua, how did you know we'd be so delayed that we'd need the flower? What does that really mean? Lavo levikuach kulehai ad she'ata aveta imcha gam sulta shem shar chachmot. How did you know that we would need astronomy and mathematics and science in order to defeat the tzdukim when talking about the calendar and talking about, you know, all these questions that were hot button topics for the time. And then so with this brilliant metaphorical reinterpretation of the story, now we come to what is the kochav echad kol shivim shana? Okay, רוצה לומר כוכב אחד מבין אדם ששנותיו 70 שנה, right? People live for 70 years on average. So you say one star comes every 70 years, as Matet Asfanim is talking about an exceptional individual. Okay? והם הצדוקים המאמינים בכוחם ובתבונתם. Right? The tzdukim are the safanim. They're the sailors because they believe in the mazalot. They believe in the order of the nature of the stars, whatever it is. So they're all living in the galut, the tzdukim, and this star can come and confuse them. ואמרתי, Rabbi Yehoshua saying, and I said, Shema ya'alel et ototanu chas v'shalom bedor hazeh.
I think what he's claiming is pretty simple. In other words, what he's saying is that the tzdukim believe in that history just repeats itself. It's just a matter of something that just, you know, there's no continuation. There's no end of the line. There's no history, unlike their understanding as history is something that's linear. You know, obviously there's an idea that they want to reach some kind of end goal. You know, I think that's also what the Greek, outlook is. Yes,
it's the eternal recurring cycle.
Just in a recurring theme. That's the whole idea. And then they're coming. They're over there to say no. There's a point A and point Z to the.
Could be. Okay.
It's not a pshat.
It could be. ועל כוכך באתי לנצח אותם בוויכוח. So Yehoshua says that's why I came to defeat them in debate. גם בשאר חוכמות ומופתיות, צודקיות. Like to play on their, it's like to take the battle to the enemy, right? You play their game on their turf, but you still are able to you're still able to defeat them in their territory. Al emunatenu, right? ואמר לו רבי גמליאל, so רבי גמליאל says to him, כל כך חוכמה יש בידך, ועלית לספינה, דהיינו בגלות. So if you know so much, why are we in גלות? שהיה לך להציל את ירושלים לפי טיטוס, שלא תחרב. Right? You should have saved Yerushalayim from the Churban Beit HaMikdash. If you were so wise, you should have been able to avert the disaster of the Churban. כי רבי יהושע היה תלמיד של רבי יוחנן בן זכאי, because he lived at the time of the Churban. והשיב לו רבי יהושע, עד שתמה עליי, don't wonder about me. Wonder תמה על בית תלמידים שיש לך ביבשה. Wonder about them. רוצה לומר, שהיו גם כן בזמן שהיה הבית קיים. These two students were also alive at that time, ועדיין לא ירדנו אז לספינה שאין מגלות. כי דאמרינן שרבי יוחנן בן גודגותה היה מן השוערים. He was from the gatekeepers in the בית המקדש. והוא היה מן המשוררים. So I'm not 100% sure what this point is, but Rabbi Yehoshua is basically saying there's other tzaddikim who also lived at the time. It's not just me. And they were present in the Beit HaMikdash, and we weren't able to avoid the galut despite our great wisdom. So I love this interpretation. Normally it's easy to come to a story and say, it's all metaphorical, but I think the Marashal, really, there's a real depth to his perush here. And I'll add one final point, which is kind of, I think, funny. The Marashak can't agree with Wikipedia about Haley's comment. Why not? Because Halley's Comet comes only once every 75 years. And if we calculate that back, it only appeared in 66 CE. And the Churban was in 70 CE. So Halley's Comet appeared before the Churban. So the story must have happened in 66. The Maharsha is describing Rabbi Gamliel, reflecting back on why couldn't you have prevented the Churban, which means according to the Maharsha, the story must have happened after 70 CE.
Very powerful answer of Rambam to this, by the way.
Okay.
If you think of it that way.
Yeah.
Rambam speaking of the whole, them being smart, and understanding how the space works and etc. Navigation, etc. Rambam says in his scroll to the sages of Marseille, he says, those in those days who wasted their time in understanding the stars instead of learning how to fight wars. And I think there is something to it. If you really want to, as an explanation to an earthly explanation to the whole bunch.
Could be. Even though the way he's understanding
it,
he's understanding of Yehoshua as having learned those chachmot and they're being valued to them. But yes, I understand the point. Yeah. Shal koach.
Yeah.
Shal koach.